Hello everybody, it's Sharon North Pole, here at my ranch villa in Santa Cruz, California, where we are on shelter in place, or shelter at home, or stay the F at home. That's kind of what the general gist is. So I'm here by myself, and a lot of us are, either by ourselves or with a small group of people. And I thought I would share my go-to weekly recipe of chicken soup. And I started doing this years ago with the whole cabbage soup trend, and it's kind of morphed into a few different things. Something where you can kind of use what's in your fridge. So I start with a basic thing, with a roasted chicken, one of those, roasted chickens from Costco or your local store. Or if you don't want to do that, you can roast your own chicken. Anyway, I have a roasted chicken every week. I eat on that for the week, and I save the bones. And then I take the bones when the chicken is just about done, and I add it to water and make bone broth out of it. So that I've already done, and it makes a big pot of bone broth. And then if I don't get to it that same day, I put it in the refrigerator. And when it's in the refrigerator, some of the fat gets solid, and so you can have it more lean if you refrigerate it, but you don't have to if you want to make it all at once. So I get rid of the fat, and when I put the chicken in here, I take all the fat off of it. So I just put chicken bones and no meat, and I save some meat to put back in the soup when it's done. So here's the bones. So we've got all these chicken bones that are basically from the roasted chicken. And as you eat the roasted chicken, save the bones in the refrigerator so you have them for this soup. So there you have the basic soup. And I use 2 pans because I like to saute the onions and garlic separate before I make the soup. So I take another pan, clean it out, the one that the bones came from. And this one I'm going to take and put the garlic and onion in it. And so I like using whole garlic, but they didn't have any. So this time I'm using a jar of garlic, and I kind of make these X's in the onions. I don't use a food processor, hardly ever. I have one, but I always get confused on how to use it. And I've moved around so much that it's not always with me. So I've just learned to kind of create these cross hatches in the onion and put it in. And of course, wash your hands before you start all this stuff. So I'm going to put this broth to the side, get it out of the way for now. So that's the broth. This is going to have, it's a saute pan. So I'm going to add, I like to use olive oil because it's really good for you, and it holds a pretty high temperature. So I like to put some olive oil in the bottom of the pan, and once I get the olive oil in here, I'll add the onion and the garlic. So I'll add the onion to saute it, and then I'll add the garlic. And I would normally use garlic that is fresh and mince it myself. But this one, I didn't have any fresh garlic in our current pandemic hoarding situation, so I've got this one. So I'm going to add a couple of scoops. Garlic's a great immune enhancer, so I use lots of garlic and saute the garlic and the onions together, and try not to burn it. I usually burn it, but I'm going to try not to because I'm on television or I'm on live. So I'm going to try not to burn the thing. And then I've already peeled this ginger. Again, I use a lot of ginger, a great anti-inflammatory, good for your immune system. So ginger is a good one. So I'm going to dice up the ginger and put it in there with the garlic and the onion. We'll do some dicing and make sure we don't burn this up. This big fancy stove, I don't have such a stove where I normally am. So I don't have this big stove that has such high heat, I burn everything. So it's here at the retreat center, this big kind of chef's kitchen and this big chef stove, but I have a much smaller, more conservative one at home that doesn't have at my other house. I don't stay here often. It's usually rented out. And I'm just here because it's not rented right now, because it is a sheltering time for all of us. So it's open. So I decided to do my shelter in place here and play with all of the different things that it has here. So that's what I'm doing. I'm dicing up the ginger, sautéing the onions and the garlic. Get the ginger diced as small as I can. They don't have a very big knife here, so I would prefer a better knife. But anyway, that's that. Keep this from burning, so you gotta keep stirring it, because as you know, if you're a cook, it's really easy to burn the onions. So that's where we are right now. Let me come over here and check and see if this is still recording. It is, so we've got that working. All right, gang, so one of the things we can do while we're here, kind of in our shelter time, in our hibernation, if you will, is cook. Of course, if we cook, then we eat. So next after this is done, I'm going to go on a walk, because it's really easy at this particular time to just spend your whole day worrying and eating. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to worry, eat, worry, eat. So no, we got to try to find a different plan. So once I cook this thing and I get it on the stove, then I'm going to go for my afternoon walk. And I did some meditation and a little bit of yoga this morning, so I'm good that way. So I try to make sure I have a balance of what goes in and what goes out, and I don't eat too much and not exercise. And boy, that's really a challenge now, because we're all locked up. So I'm going to dice these carrots and get them ready. You can use big carrots or little carrots, any kind of carrots. So I'm going to do the carrots. And my core stuff is always the same, but then I use kind of whatever I have in the way of vegetables that might need to be used. So today I have a beet that's already been cooked. This is the beet, and I love beet greens, so I always try to buy beets and love the leafy part of the green beets, kind of like spinach. But I always threw away these stalks of the beet greens. But I've learned that if I cut them up and save them, that I can use them in the soup, and they add that nutrition, and I don't waste the stems that are kind of not very good to eat by themselves. So that's what I do with those extra beet greens. So this is cooking away over here, sautéing my garlic and onions till the onions get kind of clear. And that's that. So I'm going to leave these carrots till I get the broth in there, which is next. And then I love bell peppers. And as I mentioned the other day, they're really high in vitamin C, even more than oranges and other citrus. So really use bell peppers in your cooking. Of course, they're good raw, and everything probably has more, well, it does have more nutrition when it's raw than when you cook it. But what's good is when you make these soups, all of the vitamins and minerals that you would normally throw away in the water when you boil vegetables, you don't throw away. It stays right in your soup and keeps you with the vitamins and minerals that you would otherwise just pitch in the garbage. So we're not pitching them. We're going to get the most out of them, because we don't know how long we're going to be here in this crazy locked up kind of time. At least for another month, at least through April. So we've got plenty of time to make some cool recipes and find new ways of cooking, new things to do, our old friends on the internet, whatever we can do to keep ourselves busy. And I try not to look at the news. I work hard on just reading a few things off my phone, because it's small, the pictures are little, and I don't get so inundated with how crazy and sad all this is. So I'm trying to stay upbeat through a really tough time. And I talked the other day about stress and how important it is to stay upbeat and not get down in the dumps over all this. And it's certainly easy to be down in the dumps in this big mess that we're in. So I'm making chicken soup, and it's chicken soup is always makes me feel happy and warm. They recommend you eat a lot of warm foods doing this, and so when I make this big pot of soup, it's really easy to go to the refrigerator, have something healthy, have a snack that's easy to get and that's warm. So that's why I like making this ahead of time, because you end up with a big old pot of it. Sometimes it barely fits in the refrigerator, but you know, it keeps you in healthy food that's easy to get to and that keeps me away from the unhealthy snacks that are easy to grab. So I make this soup easy to grab. So the onions are cooked now, and I'm going to leave the bell peppers till later because they get kind of soggy if you put them in too early, but carrots take a long time to cook. So I'm going to stick the carrots in. I'm going to go to my broth, but I got to get these bones out of the way so I don't get them all over the kitchen counter. So let's see, we take these bones, put them here, and now I'm going to add this broth, the bone broth from the chicken, to this other pan. And actually, I probably want to switch it, because I probably want the bigger pan. So I'm going to switch these pans, but how hot is that? I can do it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the bigger pan, because sometimes it gets too full. So back to the bigger pan. Now comes the cabbage. So I take a full head of cabbage and cut it in half. And be careful when you cut your cabbage in half, because it takes a big knife, and this particular head was very tough. So I had to wrestle to cut it in half, and then I cut out the core in the middle. And be careful when you cut these giant cabbages, because they're kind of a wrestling match. They're hard to get your knife through them. So I'm now going to shred up this cabbage. If you're the kind of person that uses a food processor, of course, that's probably a lot easier. But I just do it by hand. I just cut it up and get it in any old shape. It's not going in a restaurant, so nobody's going to complain if my cabbage pieces are a little too thick or a little too fat or not even, because they won't be in this hand cut up way. If you do them in a food processor, they end up really consistent, but this way, not so much. So I'm just going to cut it up however it turns out is okay, because really it's just me making cabbage soup, and then it's just me eating cabbage soup, because there's nobody else here with me at the moment. Not that everybody would be such a fan of it in the first place. My grandkids don't really like it, but I do, and it gives me, chicken soup, like chicken soup for the soul. It kind of gives me that feeling of, kind of a homemade feeling, kind of reminds me of my mom. We grew up without a lot of money. There were 5 of us, and one was in an institution, and my dad wasn't much of a provider, so we had to find ways that we could stretch whatever we could. And so we stretched the chicken, and this is one way to do that, is once the chicken's all gone, you can make a meal out of the bones. I saved some of the chicken meat to add back, but it makes it go a long way. Chickens are not expensive, and cabbage is cheap, and so this is a inexpensive, nutritious meal that can go a long way to feeding a family. So a lot of us are in a situation right now that we've never been in before, where we maybe don't have our jobs. So this is a good one to know about, because you get a lot of food for very little money, and it's healthy, and it also is soothing. Chicken soup is always a soothing kind of thing. So I put all this cabbage in there. What's in there so far now, remember, this is a test. Ask yourself, what's in the pan so far? It is garlic, onions, ginger, and now cabbage and the broth. So here we go, and that's why I put it in a bigger pan. So this is a pretty big cabbage, and so it is going to take a lot of space. If your broth gets too lean, you can always add water to it because it kind of gets boiled down when you cook it. So I'm going to stir this up, and it's already pretty full. So I'll need to add some more water to it as I go. Okay, so that's that. Now, what else are we going to put in? We're going to put these 2 cans of, I like fire roasted diced tomatoes, and this one is in garlic and olive oil. So I try to find some kind of flavor in these cans of tomatoes, so they're not just boring. And now I have to figure out where the can opener is. Hang on, I'll be right back. Let's see where that thing is. Like I said, I am not usually here, so I don't know where they currently have put the can opener. I could hope they still have one. So I'm just going to skip those for the moment because I don't know where the can opener is. I'll come back to it. So let's see what else. I'm going to put spices in, and this is roasted garlic, sea salt, and rosemary. So I'm going to add some of that. Kind of stuck in there. I'll get a knife. Okay, so whatever kind of spices you like, this one's rosemary and garlic. It's gotten pretty solidified, so it's having a moment of being kind of tough. But there goes some. Okay, so there's that one. I also use Dash or some other salt-free seasoning, and so I add a bunch of that into it. And it's a big pot, so I'm going to use the rest of this because it takes a lot of seasoning in that great big old pot. And then I am going to add turmeric. Again, we talked about turmeric. Terrific anti-inflammatory. I take turmeric every day in the morning, and then I put it in a lot of my food. And it's got kind of a Middle Eastern flavor to it, but I've gotten used to it. And I actually buy the raw turmeric, which is a little root. It looks a lot like the turmerics are about this big. They're kind of orange, and you can usually buy them in the supermarket, but they didn't have any turmeric. So I would use fresh turmeric if they had it. So I'm going to now add these stems of the beets. So I'm going to add those. I'm going to save some because I use them in my shake, but this is a good place for them because they're kind of tough otherwise. And now the soup cooks for so long that it's not tough. And we've already got the carrots in there. And normally you'd put the beet in right now so it has time to cook, but this beet's already cooked. So I'm going to leave that. Now I'm going to prepare the greens. So I use baby kale. It's just easier. Any kale is really good for you. It's a power green for sure. And then spinach. I'm going to put these in here and rinse them off. These are both organic, but you want to rinse them anyway because you don't know who's touched them, especially now. So I'm going to take 2 big handfuls of greens and I'm going to rinse them off in this sink over here. I'm going to rinsing. Okay, rinsing. All right, so that's rinsed. Drain it a little. I'm going to wait for this because, again, the cabbage is going to take the longest. The cabbage and the carrots take the longest to cook. So I don't add everything in there until that stuff has had a chance to cook. Unless you're going to put potatoes or yams or beets. If you want any of those things, they go in now. I try to keep the carbs down, so I don't put potatoes or corn or yams into it. Sometimes I put beets because they're so good for you. But that's the only root that I put in here, and I try to keep the carbs down. So in this soup, I don't put rice or beans or any of the pasta or legumes, just because it's my go-to thing, and I try to keep the calories really low, and that's how I do it, is by not putting a lot of carbs in it. So you can add carbs to it. If you have a family, if you have a growing family and boys and kids that are running around, then I recommend you do put carbs in it because they need the carbs. But as a mature lady, some might call me a senior. I don't like to say that, but it's true. I am a senior, and it's not as easy to keep the weight down as it used to be. So I try to really limit the carbs, unless it's a carb that I really, really want. So I make those choices. It's all about choices. It's all about how you live your daily life so that you can stay lean and mean to go out there and conquer the world with lovely zest and live your best life. You don't want to be too chubby to do that. So one way to keep the chub down is to keep the carbs down. So this is my a non-chubby soup. So that's about all that goes in here. And then it cooks until the cabbage is translucent. And right before the cabbage is done, I'll put in the bell peppers so that they don't get all disintegrated and too slimy. And I'll put in this cooked beet, and I'll put in the greens that I just washed in the sink. And if I can find the can opener, wherever they hid it from me, I don't use canned food hardly at all, but I use it in this. So I got to dig up the can opener. And then one more thing, let me go over here and show you this. When you're at the last part of the chicken, I always save some of the meat for the soup. So I cut up some of the breast. I'm a dark chicken eater. I prefer the dark meat. I like the legs and the thighs, so they're always gone. And by the time I'm done with the legs and the thighs and the wings, the breast is a little bit dry. So that's what I choose to save and cut up and put it in the soup. And I put it in when everything else is done, so that the soup is, so that the chicken doesn't turn into, you know, something soggy and disintegrate into a know-not-what. So the key to having your soup delicious and not one big swamp is how you put things in. So you want to put the softest things in towards the end so your soup doesn't end up to be just one big mushy pot. You know, I like things to have some texture and to be able to identify what it is. And as I said before, I don't like know-not-what dishes, stuff that you look at it and it's just a big slop or gruel or, you know, whatever you want to call it. So if you coordinate it so you put the things in as they cook, the things that are the hardest first and the things that are not so hard later, then you end up with a soup that has some texture and more nutrition to it because you haven't cooked it to death. So that's my tip. I hope that you'll try it out and enjoy it and have some in your fridge so when you get hungry and you want a little bit of something warm and something nourishing and something that nourishes your soul, chicken soup is one of those things. So thanks. I'm sorry you can't join me for the end product and have a bowl of soup with me. I'm sorry nobody can have a bowl of soup with anybody else or go to the restaurant and have a bowl of soup. But one day this will pass and we'll all be breaking bread and having soup together. So hang in there, gang. Looking forward to connecting with you on however we can right now, Facebook, Instagram. I'm Zesty Change, and all of my medium is under that name, Zesty Change, Sharon North Pole. I have a YouTube channel that's kind of fun to look at, and it's again Zesty Change. So there's some fun things, some pictures of the Caribbean and some pictures of the tropics that are cheerful. So that's my little message for the day is make some soup and stay happy. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.